If you love gripping Wild West tales filled with outlaws, dusty streets, and unexpected romance, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Would you have the courage to face a notorious outlaw with nothing but kindness? Let's ride straight into the story. The outlaw everyone feared had a name that rolled off the tongue like a curse: Jesse Blackthorne. He was spoken of in hushed tones across the frontier, the kind of man whose shadow could send saloon doors swinging shut and poker games scattering. Mothers warned their children about him, preachers prayed the town would never hear the clatter of his boots. He was not just another gunslinger, he was a living legend, and legends in the West usually left blood in their wake. Yet in the same week Jesse's reputation was being whispered through back alleys, the town of Willow Creek welcomed someone entirely different. Clara Belle Monroe stepped off the stagecoach with a trunk of books and a posture as straight as a fence post. Her eyes held a gentleness that seemed out of place among the weathered faces of men who had seen too much. She was the new schoolteacher, and the townsfolk, weary of lawlessness, regarded her as if she carried hope in her satchel. Willow Creek was a fragile place. Its sheriff was tired, its shopkeepers wary, and its churchgoers prayed for peace that never lasted. They all knew Jesse Blackthorne would come back sooner or later. His raids left the town rattled, his name etched like a scar across its memory. But Clara knew nothing of Jesse, at least not beyond what she overheard at the general store. She only knew the children needed learning, and she intended to give them that, no matter how rough the land or its men. One evening, while lanterns burned low and the desert stretched black beneath the stars, Jesse returned. His horse staggered into town, foam caked on its muzzle. Jesse himself swayed in the saddle, a deep gash across his arm from a skirmish that had gone badly. Doors slammed. Curtains dropped. Not a soul dared greet him. He rode past the saloon, past the sheriff's office, until his gaze caught the soft glow of the schoolhouse window. Inside, Clara was tidying books by lamplight. He dismounted and pushed through the door without knocking. Clara turned, startled, but her expression held no scream, no flight. Only curiosity mixed with concern. Jesse filled the room like a storm, his hat shadowing eyes that burned with suspicion. "Water," he growled, his voice rough from dust and blood. Clara fetched a tin cup and handed it to him without a word. When she saw the blood trailing down his arm, she reached for clean cloth from her trunk. Jesse's hand hovered near his revolver, as though ready to stop her, but when her gentle fingers pressed the cloth against his wound, he found himself frozen. No one had touched him with kindness in years. "Why aren't you afraid?" he demanded, his tone sharper than a whip crack. Clara's gaze did not waver. "Because I see a man in pain, not a monster." The words hit harder than any bullet he'd taken. Jesse scoffed, trying to mask the unease curling in his chest. "You don't know who I am." "I've heard," she said softly, binding the wound with steady hands. "But stories don't always tell the truth." Outside, whispers spread through the town faster than prairie fire. Someone had seen Jesse enter the schoolhouse. By morning, every mouth in Willow Creek repeated the tale, the feared outlaw and the new schoolteacher, alone together. The sheriff clenched his jaw and muttered to the mayor that Clara had no idea what kind of danger she was inviting. But Clara knew exactly what she had seen in his eyes, a man carrying the weight of choices that bent his back like old timber. She didn't excuse him, but she couldn't fear him either. For Jesse, the visit lingered. He rode away before dawn, but the memory of Clara's calm voice and steady hands gnawed him. His old life offered nothing but gun smoke and betrayal, yet here was a woman who looked at him as if he were something more than a legend of violence. It unsettled him more than any bullet wound. Back in the hills, Jesse's gang heard of his schoolhouse visit and mocked him. Men who had once followed him with blind loyalty now spat his name with derision. They wanted him to lead another raid, to remind Willow Creek why Jesse Blackthorne was feared. But Jesse sat silent by the fire, staring at the bandage still tied to his arm. Meanwhile, Clara faced the town's growing disapproval. Mothers warned her she was endangering the children. The sheriff himself visited her classroom, his hat in his hands, and told her kindly but firmly to stay away from Jesse. "That man's heart is black as coal, and if you let him near you, he'll burn this whole town down," he warned. Clara only answered, "Even coal can hold a spark." By week's end, tension in Willow Creek had thickened like a brewing storm. The townsfolk waited for Jesse's next move, fearful it would come in the form of gunfire. Clara, however, waited for something else. She waited to see if the man she'd glimpsed behind the legend would dare show himself again. And Jesse, sitting in the dark hills above town, could not stop thinking about a schoolteacher who hadn't flinched when she looked into the eyes of the West's most feared outlaw. Jesse Blackthorne stayed on the ridge above Willow Creek longer than he meant to, his horse pawing the dirt, his mind restless. The outlaw in him said, "Ride on, find another town to bleed dry, return to the shadows that had always kept him safe." But the memory of Clara Belle Monroe's eyes kept needling him, calm, unwavering, unafraid. He had been stared at by bounty hunters, by sheriffs, by men who thought they were faster on the draw. None of them had unsettled him like a single schoolteacher who'd met his glare with gentleness. The days that followed dragged like molasses, until at last Jesse let his horse carry him down into town again. He told himself it was only to see if the sheriff was stirring trouble, or if his gang had crept too close. But his steps drew him past the saloon, past the livery, until he stood in the yard of the schoolhouse. Children laughed inside. Their voices carried on the air like a language Jesse had forgotten. He stayed outside, listening. Clara's voice rose above the chatter, warm as a fire on a cold night, teaching lessons of trust, honesty, hope. Something shifted in him. That night, when the fence behind the schoolhouse collapsed, Jesse repaired it under cover of darkness. When the supply wagon lost a wheel on the trail, it was Jesse who lifted it free and left without waiting for thanks. Clara noticed. She never spoke of it to the sheriff or to the townsfolk, but when she looked out the window during lessons and caught a glimpse of a shadow moving along the ridge, she smiled. But peace never lasts long on the frontier. Jesse's old gang thundered into Willow Creek one dusk, their laughter sharp as broken glass. The saloon emptied, and shutters slammed as they rode straight to the schoolhouse, dragging the smell of whiskey and gunpowder with them. Their leader, Flint McGraw, spat tobacco into the dirt and called out Jesse's name. "You hiding in there, Blackthorne?" Flint sneered. "Word is you've gone soft, playing house with a schoolmarm." His men roared with laughter. "Time you remembered who you are." Jesse stepped out from the shadows, his revolver at his side. The gang shifted, relieved to see him, certain he'd return to their fold once reminded. But Jesse's gaze was locked on Flint, a man who had once called him brother. "I remember who I am," Jesse said, his voice low, steady. "And I'm done." Flint's grin faltered. "Done? You think you get to walk away? You made us feared. Without you, we're nothing." Jesse shook his head. "Then maybe it's time you were nothing." The standoff thickened the air. Clara had ushered the children inside, bolting the doors, but she remained at the window, watching. She knew this moment was more than a fight, it was a choice Jesse had to make. Flint drew first. The crack of his pistol split the night. Jesse's gun answered in the same heartbeat, the flash illuminating his hard-set jaw. Flint stumbled, blood blooming across his chest, and fell into the dust. Silence swept the street. The rest of the gang shifted uneasily, their loyalty to Jesse rattled. "Ride," Jesse barked. "Or stay and meet the same end." They hesitated, then spurred their horses, vanishing into the desert. Only Flint's body remained, still in the dust, a dark reminder of what Jesse had chosen to leave behind. The town crept from hiding. Lanterns lit the street. The sheriff stared at Jesse with a mix of disbelief and reluctant respect. Jesse's shoulder was bleeding from a grazing shot, but he didn't flinch. Clara came out, her hands trembling, and walked straight to him. She pressed her hand against his wound, unafraid. The sight of her in the open, in front of everyone, tending to the most feared man in the territory, stilled every tongue. For Jesse, it was the first time he had not felt like prey or predator, but like a man seen for what he could be. He looked at Clara and for once, didn't see judgment. He saw belief. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Town can't stomach you running free with that iron on your hip." You stay, it's under my law. No raids, no blood. Jesse unbuckled his gun belt and let it fall into the dust. The metallic thud echoed louder than any shot he'd fired. Then I stay as a man, not an outlaw. Weeks passed. Jesse labored beside the townsfolk, silent but steady. He built desks for Clara's classroom, hammered planks for the church roof, hauled barrels for the general store. The people watched, suspicion softening into wary acceptance. Children whispered that the outlaw was not so scary anymore. Some even smiled when they saw him. One evening, long after the children had gone home, Jesse lingered in the schoolhouse doorway. Clara was tidying books again, her hair catching the lamplight. He cleared his throat, more nervous than he'd ever been with a gun in his hand. I never thought I could be anything but what folks feared, he said. You looked at me different. I don't understand why. Clara closed the book in her hands and met his eyes. Because I saw the man, Jesse. Not the story. His chest tightened, a feeling fiercer than any battle. He stepped closer, uncertain but drawn forward as though her presence pulled him like the tide. For once, there was no sneer on his lips, no armor in his voice. Only gratitude. You tamed something in me I thought couldn't be touched, he said. Clara smiled gently. It wasn't taming. It was seeing. Outside, the night stretched wide and silent, the desert stars bright above Willow Creek. Jesse Blackthorne, the outlaw once feared in every corner of the frontier, laid his gun aside for good. In its place, he found a peace no bullet could destroy, standing beside the schoolteacher who had believed in him when no one else dared. And as the town settled into quiet, Jesse knew that for the first time in his life, he had a future, one not written in gun smoke, but in the steady light of Clara's gaze.